Here we go. So I want to start a little bit and talk kind of a big picture where tax money comes from in Iowa. The primary sources of taxes that the state government has to fund healthcare, education, public safety, everything, come primarily from two sources, and that's personal income taxes and sales taxes. And so as we talk about spending money, whether it's for K12 schools or whether we talk about money spent on tax cuts for Iowa businesses, the people that pay are these folks. I don't know if I'm pressing the wrong button here. There we go. All right. So this chart is the state and local taxes. It includes property taxes, income taxes, and sales taxes paid to the state. And you can see if you're making the third column, it's $41,000 to $62,000. You're paying about nearly 10% of your income in state and local taxes. If you're making more than $376,000, you're paying about 6%. Okay. So this is a fair, we in Iowa, big point, we have a fairly regressive overall tax system in Iowa. Working people, lower income people pay a greater percent of their income in taxes to support all the basic things we'd like to see done by our state government. This chart, if you look at all the other 50 states, most states' charts look like this. In Iowa, we have a progressive, I'm going to go to the next slide, I guess I did that, sales tax. So one of the reasons it is so regressive is that sales taxes fall disproportionately on people that make less money, okay? So what we'd like to see these charts look like is we'd like them to go uphill the other way. We have, I think, we need a more progressive income tax structure whereby the people that have more resources are asked to contribute more to the services that we all share. And if you were to look at Iowa's income tax structure, we have a slightly progressive income tax in that, I didn't bring that chart, but the chart goes gently up, going the other direction. But when you add sales tax and property taxes into it, you get the chart that chart. Okay, so this is combined. Our income tax is slightly progressive. So we start in Iowa with a unfair system, okay, as we think of, next slide. Thanks. Where does all the money go? Now, I'm going to, this is, you're starting out with kind of, here's the reality of here's where the state budget is. We're going to be fighting over the next number of weeks about how much we can afford to put into our education system, our healthcare system, public safety. I'm going to talk about one narrow piece of the spending pie today, and that's what we've done in the area of providing incentives and tax money to Iowa businesses to create jobs. So that's my focus. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those others. Right off the top, this year, we're going to see about a $70+ million increase in tax cuts to Iowa businesses. And those come in a couple different forms. You can go to the next slide. And I'll come back to the specifics, but this kind of a big picture. Since 2007, we've seen nearly a 260% increase in spending on tax incentives. A whole host of things, including big commercial industrial property tax cuts. We gave the Department of Economic Development $50 million more a year back in, I think, 2011 or 12. Authority to spend on getting business deals. But the biggest piece is about $300 million increase in what we did on commercial and industrial property taxes back in about 2013. Next slide, please. So these data, you're going to hear from Mike Owen later. The Iowa Policy Project is doing just terrific work in helping people that are in these jobs understand what we're doing. And this is the last chart was, data was theirs. This is their chart from their recent report a couple weeks ago about this. And it shows essentially a pretty big increase, a very big increase actually. There's your $71 million from the previous chart. Existing business credits under FY17, about $275 million. The commercial industrial property tax, $304 million. And then this summer, the governor announced that Consumable supplies, basically supplies used in the manufacture of goods by manufacturers. Previously paid sales taxes on them. Over the summer, the Department of Revenue director said we're going to move the business community the business community petitioned for some rulemaking to remove the tax, and through the rulemaking process, they're proposing to start on July 1st. It's actually, it says 35 million. I think the fiscal estimate starts at 50 million. There's a lot of uncertainty. It could be more than that, but that was out without any legislative approval. And the consumable supplies sales tax on exemption is a bill that in the Senate, we said we can't afford that. We've given all these property tax cuts. We need to absorb them and pay for them before you come forward, business community, and ask for your next thing. So we decided not to pass that and stop that in the Senate, but administratively the governor went and said, no, I'm going to give these large manufacturers, and most of the benefit, it goes to all manufacturers, but largely to the biggest ones. So that gives you a little bit of detail. Next slide, please. So one of the issues this session, and you've heard about it, and it's probably going to be the reason we fight as long as we fight, is how much are we going to fund our K-12 schools? And we are falling behind. Just let me say, we have not been keeping up. We've gone through an income, and let's go back a little bit of history. In 1997, the state cut income taxes by 10%. And it was probably the beginning of the decline in our spending on K-12 schools, all through the 2000s. And then we get through the 2000s, and then we make another big tax cut called the property tax cut, and we've really undermined our ability to fund the schools. And whether that's community colleges, last year for the first time, I'm in my 18th year, last year was the first time I can remember that the community colleges in Iowa didn't get $1 increase to their general fund appropriation. 90,000 community college students. If the state doesn't provide some sort of resource, it all goes to tuition increases. So we've put ourselves in kind of a position, and especially on education funding. Let's go to the next slide to give a little more detail about that. So how many additional dollars has Iowa invested in K-12 kids since Governor Branstad was elected? Let's see the next slide and we'll find out. So in 2011, between state funding and local property taxes, we put about $5,883 behind each of our K-12 kids. There's, 450, 60, 70,000 K-12 kids in our system today. And the legislature establishes the number. We provide a state appropriation, and we allow our local school districts to go and collect property taxes to equal that number. So since 2011, the legislature, we've given a little bit, 2%. Branstad's first year, they got no new money. I think it was 2%, then it was 2%, and then a delayed 2%, and then 4%. This year, we're at 1.25% increase. So if you adjust for, so the number, if you were to adjust for inflation across all those increases, in 2016, it would be $6,440. But when you do the actual adjustment, what did inflation go up? It's up to $6,446. So next slide, please. So what does that amount to for each kid? Since Governor Branstad has arrived, we've increased K-12 funding per student over that 5 years by $6 per student. And I'm going to take a shot. Republicans refuse to fund it. The public education has become a bit too partisan. Democrats more willing to invest in education. Republicans, they want to do private stuff. They want to do homeschool stuff. So it's been more partisan than it should be. But there's also the basic fact that we either have the money to fund education or we don't. And I would like to suggest that some of the tax policy, this 260% increase in tax credit spending, while we've had this very meager increase in K-12 funding, is a result of decisions made by the legislature to cut taxes without regard to what it does to other parts of the budget. So about a year ago, we're probably in the neighborhood of about $1,500 per student behind the national average in how much resources we put behind every one of our kids. Other states have moved ahead and continue to fund education as we've kind of gone backwards. And it's not all about money, but if you want to have the best teachers in the classroom, and people have opportunity to do other things with their lives besides going to the classroom, you have to have a decent salary for people. And increasingly, we have more kids and more families struggling economically that need more support in our schools, not less, okay? More languages, more poverty, more mental health issues, which all results in the need for more support for our youngsters in K-12. We're spending a lot of time last year, the year after that, this year talking about skilled workforce. The business community's after us. We need skilled workers. Skilled workers starts at kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, in third grade. You cannot undermine our public schools and think somehow when somebody turns 21 or 22, they're going to be able to have the math and reading and all the skills we need in our workforce today. It starts at K-12. It doesn't start at some training program that we're going to do at the community college level, although that's important and we should have that. Next slide, please. So what are school administrators saying about this poor support of schools? They say that another year of stagnant funding, more crowded classes. And you know, probably the two biggest indicators of kids getting ahead is a good teacher, number one, and number two, having a class that you can get the attention you need as a student. And larger class sizes make it really, really hard for our teachers to give every youngster what they need. Let's go to the next slide. Well, the kids, that looks like a pretty big class size there. Let's go to the next one. So, what should we do to create and bring good jobs and good wages to Iowa? Well, there's one thing that I'm pressing my colleagues about. Let's go to the next slide. There it is. So we need to say no to really what's been runaway spending in this part of the budget. Governor Brand said in his 5th year, his advice to every one of his administrators, whether it's the Department of Natural Resources, whether it's education, whether it's transportation, whether it's the prison system, the prisons, the courts, don't ask for any new money this year. Status quo. We're in six years of status quo. And for every one of those departments of state government that want to do clean water, have good health services, have a good transportation system, they've had to cut things because their employees tend to get raises every year, thank God. And they don't fill positions, and they're basically eating themselves by not having more money. So that's state government across all services, but it's clearly impacted this. And as I said to my colleagues last week, we should say no to more big ideas until we can afford a 4% rate of allowable growth, which is a very modest proposal. Senate Democrats currently are at 4%. House Republicans are at 2% on allowable growth. We're probably going to end up somewhere under 3. But if the truth be known, that's probably about all we can afford. So we've created a circumstance, unfortunately, kind of a self-inflicted wound, if you will, that, and I understand this. I mean, I serve and oversee this committee on taxes, and one of the jobs of the tax committee is not only to cut taxes, but it's to ensure that the state has enough revenue to meet the basic needs of the people of our state for education, Again, public safety, health care, clean water, all the things that people and I want us to do. And so sometimes you have to say no, which is hard for people, to say no to ideas that come from the lobby to do the next best thing. And it's not easy. I mean, members have businesses in their districts. Those businesses have ideas about how to do things. We have more than 40 different tax credits on the books now. They're not all bad. I like a few of them. That one has increased, the earned income tax credit. Earned income tax credit goes to about 220,000 households. Those households have 2 or 3 kids. They make under $45,000 or less a year. #1 anti-poverty program in the state. We've increased it from about $30 million a year, Democrats led on this, to about $70 million a year. That's one of the increases, okay? So they're not all bad. I'm for having tax cuts that help people with more opportunity and more education, and that would be a good example. I'm going to stop. I could go on, but I'll stop with that and see what's on your minds. A few questions about any topics related to this. Again, we need to basically stop, quit digging the hole, quit digging, pay for what we've got on the books. The property tax thing I mentioned, it was a 3-year phase-in of the property tax thing. And by the way, the property tax bill is being paid by us, because we're giving the cities the money we gave away to the property taxpayers. We still, this year, the first $25 million we're going to spend is on the third year of putting that in place. We haven't even absorbed it yet, okay? So it's not the most rosy picture, but we can't correct the problem until we understand the problem. And I've had conversations with members of my caucus repeatedly over the last 3 weeks about the circumstance we find ourselves in and the need to just stop until we get to a point where we can fund our schools. And as you go to the Capitol today and tomorrow, see people tonight. I hope to be back here tonight for a little reception. I encourage you to talk to your legislators back home about this and let them know that you're paying attention to it. Thank you.